Welcome to the Story Tinker Podcast, a place for in-depth analysis of webtoon stories. Co-hosted by sharp, witty, and dare I say thirsty fans, we dive deep into every episode, analyzing character struggles, relationship development, and of course, theories. You can follow the Story Tinker on YouTube, podcast platforms, and social media. For bonus content, sneak peeks, and more, you can support the Story Tinker on Patreon. We are really appreciative of your likes, subscribes, and follows on all platforms. Thank you for listening to the Story Tinker, and let's get started.
Yes.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 84 of Midnight Poppyland on the Story Tinker. And today we have Erin and Jenn.
Hey. Hi.
Yes, and today is a heavy enough episode that it starts with a trigger warning and a disclaimer, which I think is worth to read. The warning says, this episode contains some disturbing themes. Please proceed with caution. And the disclaimer is that all mental conditions, symptoms, and coping strategies depicted in here are not meant to be seen as instructional or used as a guide. Any similarities to actual mental conditions are purely coincidental, and the conditions and symptoms depicted in here do not come with psychiatric diagnosis or label. Which is good. You know, we're all armchair psychologists, obviously. That's what we do here. But it's nice to have a grain of salt there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely a heavy episode. Would you like to dive right in, Erin?
Sure. So we start with this beautiful skyline of Narin City at night, and you can see red on the bridge there. So clearly we're picking up with Tora immediately. So he is out of the car over on the side of the bridge. And I mean, my first thought was like, okay, we know that he is at least stable enough that that's not the concern here of him at the edge of the bridge, but like clearly whatever happened, he needed some air, he needed some breathing room, and being stuck in his tiny little sports car was not enough room for him.
Mm-hmm. I was actually worried, by the way, at some point later on. I was like, get away from the edge of the
Yeah, a little later on, maybe, yeah. But at first I was like, okay, he's having a moment, needs some fresh air.
There's also a lot of symbolism in bridges and on its own, because I mean, basically you're standing at a precipice. So there's you can tell there's a lot of something coming. You just don't know exactly what it is at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So then we go to his internal monologue. Ronzo tracked down that effer Gil with the facial recognition hack, and I spent the entire day racing across the city to chase him down. You've got his go bag in the back seat, so clearly stuff happened in theory. Big bro,
when I saw that, I was like, oh, so he wants to kill him. I was like, okay. Like, what happens next? I'm just curious. Like, how do they cover their tracks? Like, someone dies and then they're like, they bury him somewhere, no one can find him. They're like, just hope nobody figures it out. Like,
or like, is he just trying to incapacitate him in some way? Like, because I feel like if we know that Gil is shady AF, but like, if they kill him now, what does that do to like everybody else that's tied up in this? Like, I feel like that would almost cause more problems for giant goldfish. Like, it would just shed a whole new level of light on and scrutiny on Poppy, on Erdine and Jacob. What were Gil's dealings? Like, there would be an investigation into Quincy, because he's their biggest author right now. Like, that's a whole different can of worms that they probably don't want to open.
I don't know, but if he randomly gets shots, like even if in like the leg or the arm or something, I think that would also, I mean, he would then instigate something.
Yeah, I was gonna say, in this type of situation, it's probably better dead than wounded, and I hate to say it that way. But you know, wounded, he comes back and he can like name names.
Yeah.
Dead, he's just dead. For me, it also is like, this place seems to be fairly well run by these crime syndicates. So I feel like they just bury it. I mean, they've already basically described in way earlier episodes having a lot of cops on the payroll. So I think basically it would just disappear.
Yeah, enough people they'd be able to get somebody to look the other way.
Yeah.
Probably. And maybe he figures he was acting alone. Like, as far as we know, I don't remember him saying anything about him acting with other people. So maybe he figures if he kills him, Poppy's safe.
But he can also probably explain it to the Vincent by being like, well, I thought he had the notebook, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So he's
Which
he
technically
does have
doesn't
the
he?
notebook.
I'm pretty sure he does have the notebook, but we don't have actual physical verification of that yet.
And Tora doesn't
So-
know that. He just knows that the notebook is somewhere potentially in Poppy's circle of influence.
Right. I mean, it seems very plausible to me that at this point he would just want to eliminate the threat, because that seems where his head is at, is eliminate the threat.
Yeah. So then we've got the shot of you on his computer. Big bro, I picked up his trail again. 5 o'clock from your position, right where you said he'd appear. And we've got that, Gil pointed out in the crowd, but like clearly there's a lot of people there. And Tora says, I see him, but he's moving into a crowd. And I reread this morning, and my first thought was like, okay, we know that Tora's a sniper, and I was thinking, like, he could be in a position, he's got the bag in the back of the car, so like he could be in position to try to take him out, but at the same time, it's still like when he's doing all this is still the daylight hours. Like, that seems real weird. And we know that he obviously, it's just keep talking, there's still too many, keep tailing, there's still too many people in the way. So like, clearly Tor's not going to take a shot in a crowded plaza or something like that. But I was just like, oh, that was where I had the realization of, oh shit, like he's for real. He's for serious right now.
And where is he? Like, that he's safe from people watching him.
Yeah. And like that's that game face that he's got in that shot. Like that's that same dead eyes. He is so laser focused on his task right now that nothing is going to interfere with his business right now.
Yeah. For this panel, I literally wrote serious eyes. But I also was like, okay, we're finally seeing, like, we got the impression that he was a sniper from the other comics, but you're actually seeing a bit of the sight in this comic. So you can actually, she basically is confirming, yes, he snipes people.
Right. Yeah, last time it was deduction, I guess.
Yeah. So then back to his internal monologue, but I was always a step too late. And by the end of the day, his trail had disappeared, which I'm sure for Tora, like, that never happens. Like, he seems like the kind of guy that always makes his mark. It doesn't matter. He will see his job through regardless. But obviously, endangering tons of people in wherever he found Gil initially was not going to happen. But imagine
Gil knows he's being followed. Because we know he went to a hideaway, but that could have also been because he killed his wife. But like, does he know he's being followed, and that's why he's only in populated places?
I mean, he did know he was being followed at some point, and that's why he did the whole alarm thing. I'm wondering about the timeline in terms of, was this on his way to finding his wife's body, or like after he had already left there and he was now still trying to make sure that he couldn't be found again so that he could be on his creepy little way?
I think we're after the body. Because it seemed like when he was there, he was talking about having shaken the guys that had done it. And he did shake, oh God, was it like 2 or 3 episodes ago? He did shake off Tora's men. Like Brian lost him out of that building. So that seemed to be tied more to that situation.
Yeah, that
I think
makes
he
more
went
sense.
right there.
Yeah, that makes more sense, that they probably picked him up after he left that location and was on his way to wherever he does the rest of his shady dealings.
Yeah.
Then we have another wide shot of Tora leaning over the edge of the bridge. I don't even know what the fuck I'm doing anymore. And right at that moment, Joe's stupid voice went off in my head again.
It's just, you know, that line where he says like, I don't know what I'm doing anymore. I feel so bad for him. He just feels helpless.
He feels so, I think he feels like so unmoored. Like he had everything in clan life as clear, as terrible as it was, as we see later on in the episode, as stressful and as terrible as that led him down a path. Like it was a constant, it was a solidarity in his life. And now that he has been distancing himself from that, and obviously now he's having to deal with emotions, like what the heck? Like all of this new stuff, I think he's feeling very untethered. He's adrift because there's nothing, he's looking for something else to anchor him, and I think he wants it to be Poppy. And with this whole thing with Joe's line from him, like I think Poppy is probably going to be that new anchor for him, but he's not quite ready to commit to that yet. Like he's still in the, I'm still too dangerous for her, it's going to be bad. But like, I think he so desperately wants her to be his new anchor point that he knows she will always be there.
So I do have comments, but I want to kind of get a little further before I like say, because they won't make sense at this point.
Got them locked and loaded.
Yeah.
So then Joe's line, remember kid, no matter how dark it gets inside, always remember to leave a light on for yourself and for someone else to find you in there. Which we've heard it before. He had that, was it right after Alice's restaurant or?
No, it was recent.
It was, I was gonna say, wasn't it in one of the Joe flashbacks that we
I
got?
It was in the alleyway, I think, when he was doing that thing, that hand motion.
Okay, yep. So then Tora says, a light, slams his hand on the railing. It's so dark in here, I can't even see it's so dark, I can't even see my fingers in here, which, like, what a visual.
My heart just melted for him.
And you can tell he's like yelling this at himself.
Oh yeah, he's beyond frustrated with himself at this point.
But also, like, the text got really big. We've got all of these lines going out, like, and they're basically like shout lines.
Oh yeah. I mean, he's alone on this bridge, so it's being able to unload into the darkness, into the universe, and just his chest where he knows nobody's going to hear him.
And the edges of this panel start to go dark too.
Yep. And you know, we're used to seeing Tora as very capable, but here he is feeling very helpless and out of control. And it's just a different side to Tora that we can guess that he has because he's a human being, but like to really see him express himself and express his helplessness and his weakness is very humanizing and endearing, especially given his behavior last episode. It's nice to see that it's coming from pain rather than like a negative character trait or just being an asshole.
Like the asshole tendencies are I think his default because it's something he had to grow up with, but I think we know that he's trying to be better than that. We know he's trying to grow past that as a person. So yeah, slip-ups happen. In times of stress, you default to the easiest thing you can because you just want to go into autopilot. But this is him now having to reconcile, I was a massive douche and now I need to try to be better.
Well, yeah, that's a little bit later in the episode, but yeah.
Yeah.
So after that exclamation, he's starting to pant. He's breathing heavy and he says, shit, I'm spiraling again. And that forced perspective where like his head and shoulders seem so large and just his legs look so narrow because it's just that zoom angle, which just was so, it felt very cinematic. I know that's something that's been talked about on the podcast is Lily has these amazing cinematic shots and whatnot, and this feels very cinematic to give you that sense of how out of control his life feels right now.
He's like bowed over by the weight of everything on his shoulders. He can't even support himself. He's leaning over. Head is down. I mean, he looks very defeated.
And then he says, "Come." And I couldn't tell if this was him already starting to. No, okay. So he's, "Come on, stay with me." He's coaching himself, and like this whole the discussion that he's going through in his head and on the bridge, it feels very reminiscent of therapy talk that he has. I think he's been to therapy. In what capacity, I don't know, but I think at some point in his life, likely more when he was an adult, because let's face it, as a teenager, he probably was not going to be receptive to any of that. He's clearly been to therapy with some of the language that he's using with himself and some of the discussions that he's having with himself, but he recognizes this spiral. He says, "It's all in my head. It's all in my head." He's breathing heavy. His brow is furrowed. He is kind of physically collapsing on himself, like you said. His shoulders are hunched. He's leaning forward. He's in it.
In this moment, I felt like he was full on in a panic attack. That heavy breathing, I interpreted as almost like hyperventilation. Because when you get into that space, and I am somebody who has panic attacks, so I was like, oh my God, like, oh, deep breath, take a deep breath. I'm trying to talk him through it as I'm reading.
But sorry.
Oh, sorry. It's
No,
okay.
go ahead.
But it does. For me anyways, it feels like everything closes in on me and everything like becomes right here. And this is all I have for space. So this image in particular for me, like, was very reminiscent. And I literally went, okay, we're in full on panic mode.
Yeah, because everything is shadowed around him. Like his face and shirt and chest is really the only spot of color that we've gotten this whole thing. Like it's black everywhere else. Like he's so in his own head right now.
And when you said that maybe he went to therapy, I wonder if maybe the police forced him to go to therapy after he was arrested. That would make sense that they would do that.
That's exactly where I figured he picked this all up from, is that some agreement, some part of his release stipulated that he had to go to, whether it was anger management or therapy in general, or as part of his, like, whether it was parole or his release from custody, if they were able to get everything swept under the rug for whatever it was that he was arrested for. And then so this whole sequence with the shadowed and this new text that we got coming in. So you see in like super grayed out text, "Monster. You're a monster." And that's the same font that, like, I think people have joked it's the murder font in the Patreon comments. So that, and a couple of folks have said it's Vincent's voice in his head. And I don't necessarily think it's exclusively Vincent.
Yeah.
I really think it's like an amalgamation of his own internal hatred. Like he clearly has his own internal monologue that hates himself and is very demeaning to himself because that's what he grew up with. And it's very heavily influenced by Vincent. But I think it's the two of them together, and especially with the way that the font is kind of doubled in a couple of areas. Like it's that echo chamber. Like he's just only hearing this. It's echoing through his head, these voices that are just telling him, "You're a monster." And then in super shadowed in the background, "You deserve a second chance. Believe in yourself." Which is where that whole, this is probably something he had to look at therapy in like the waiting room every time he went.
Well,
Actually,
isn't it from Alice's restaurant?
Yes, it is. It's the sign that's in Alice's restaurant next to her help wanted sign.
Okay, I forgot about that.
By the way, is a total inspiration to me. Like if I ever own a business, I want to like hire, people who have been in prison. So anywho, so thank you, Alice. I think I'm very inspired by that.
So then again, that echoing, "You're a monster." And we get a flashback a little bit to a conversation. Bro, you need to get out of clan duty while you can. You're spiraling again. I'll talk to my old man. I'll say I need you as my bodyguard or something. So clearly Quincy was there for him the last time.
I love Quincy so
Right?
much.
I know. Like Quincy clearly sees him as a brother. Like he sees him as family. He wants to protect him like family because and I think there's always been a little bit of discussion of like, how much does Quincy really know about all of the terrible things that Vincent has sent Tora to do? I think this gave us a pretty decent inclination that Quincy may not know all of the specifics, but he probably has a pretty good sense that Tora does all of the dirty work. Tora's hands are the dirtiest in the clan. Unfortunately.
Yeah. I also think like it seems like from those words, like Quincy's obviously somebody who sees a lot more than he lets on.
Oh yeah.
You know, we look at the interactions we have with him and we're like, oh, he's such a like sweet, like
he's such a
cinnamon roll type of character.
Roll.
But he had to live with Vincent too. And I think sometimes we forget that. And I don't think he treated him anywhere near as horribly as he did Tora. People like that don't just treat one person differently completely. You know, I'm sure at some point, like, trauma tends to recognize trauma. So I'm sure he saw it in him, recognized it, and went, you need help. Let me help you.
Yeah. I still am dying to know what Quincy's mom's influence on his life was. Like, what we still don't know who his mother was and what clan she was affiliated with, because we know that she was also like mafia royalty. I'm dying to know like if she had any influence on his life, and was she as ruthless as Vincent is, or was she maybe a much gentler presence in his life that gave him more of this compassionate side that when Vincent found out was like, not my son, and kind of cut her off or something like that. Like, I like to think that she's maybe still alive, but I also don't hold out hope.
I feel like his mother must have been a good person, because it's very difficult to grow up with two horrible parents and be a wonderful person like Quincy is. You know,
right?
I mean, unless Quincy is just extraordinarily, good-natured by nature and worked hard on himself. But like, I think he must have had at least one good parent.
Or
I really hope so, but I can't. She's like, I know Poppy's mom is like the biggest mystery. I am so dreadfully curious about Quincy's mom.
They may
be
I
also get this feeling like Quincy's the type of person who would have had a nanny as a kid, and maybe the nanny was the one who was a nice person.
Right? Exactly. Like if Vincent was like, okay, you've given me my son, he's mine now, thank you, goodbye. But then like Vincent's not going to raise a child. Like, yeah, he would definitely have been stuck with a nanny.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, back to Tora and his panic attack. A second chance, and his breathing has escalated. The font again has gotten bold. It's a little more intense. He's telling himself, I deserve a second chance.
Closed and furrowed.
Like he is, I think, trying to will that negative voice out of his head, but at this point it's kind of he's got to ride the wave. He can't swim out of it. He's in this rip current. There's no getting out of it right now. Just got to let it go, unfortunately. And that voice says, you don't deserve anything. You don't deserve anyone. You'll be alone forever. And I know.
Yeah.
Weeping.
For me, this is like very reminiscent of when I grew up in thankfully a very positive home and a loving home, and my internal script was always very positive and optimistic. And I didn't understand until I got older and met people who were not as fortunate that you can grow up with a negative script in your head. And I was like, I realized how just like it's really hard for me to change my positive script. Like I'm very naturally optimistic. People who grew up with a negative script, it was very hard to change it also. And I didn't believe that people actually thought that way. I was like, I used to read about it in books and movies. I was like, oh, just dramatic for like the movie purposes. Then I realized like, oh my gosh, like I just lucked out, and like people really do experience like the things that make them think this way. And it's so realistic and hard to see, because it's like a ton of work to get that out of your head and to change that script.
It's very hard. I know I mentioned that I have anxiety and the panic attacks, but I've also struggled with depression I'm 32 now. When I was younger, it was much worse. You know,
Sorry.
It's okay. But those intrusive thoughts, they come in and they get stuck in your head and they replay over and over and over. And you start to question, are they real, or are they what I've been told? And they're not really how I value myself. Like you get, and he used the word spiraling, and it really kind of is a spiral, because you get stuck in that negative place and it hits replay and it goes over and over and over in your head.
And especially when you have nothing else to distract you. Like when I get in those mindsets, it's like at night when you're trying to go to bed and you start to think about like the stupidest stuff that you know, those embarrassing moments. And then I can't believe anybody, like you just get so lost in your own head, and because there's nothing to distract you in that moment, you just get so absorbed in it. And it continues to escalate.
Painful.
Yeah. So he's continuing to hyperventilate, and he says, Bobby, help. And you can see the tears on his lashes. Like he is, and this is where I was like, he wants her to be that anchor for him so badly. And because he's never had a true, I mean, yeah, he had Alice and Joe, but I don't think he was young enough that it didn't register that they were that anchor for him, you know. So he sees them as that helpful grandma, and like that, you know, maybe a big brother figure with Joe, but like I don't think he's ever had somebody that is exclusively an anchor for him. No one else. This is his person.
I don't think, I mean, maybe this is me prioritizing the romantic relationship or other relationships, because I know in my personal life, like I'm not I'm close with my friends, but like I don't have that kind of relationship with my family. Like I would never think like, oh, my mother, I couldn't open up. Like, no, for me, it's my husband. Like, and I think that I know when I met him, it was like, I mean, it was a lot of wonderful, positive feelings, but like I felt that safety. And I think that, you know, I don't think that it would be the same with like a grandma figure or Joe. Like, I mean, you're right. It was also an age thing. He wasn't ready for it at that point either. I think there's something special about like that one person who's there for you. It can't be achieved with a grandma necessarily. I don't know. Maybe everyone has different relationships with their grandmas. I don't know. Whatever. But yeah.
For me, what this panel like really like said to me, a lot of the messages that we're given right now out like in the world of social media and stuff is like, oh, you have to value yourself enough and live for yourself. But when somebody's in this type of state, it's almost bored. It's for me at this point, he was not only like depressed and having that panic attack, but it almost felt borderline suicidal for me. And again, like bridges are where 90% of like the suicides you hear about in media take place. But it is valid to live for other people because they still need you. And I think that's a message that a lot of people aren't given throughout life. Like the only reason, and I hate to put it this way, I had a friend who did actually commit suicide, and it just messed up my depression a lot. And over the next year, like the only reason that I stayed alive after that was because I did it for the people around me. the people that I knew I couldn't put people through that funeral. And I'm sorry, I'm going to get a little emotional telling you guys about this, but it really is like, everybody kept saying like, oh, you have to feel better for you, but you really, sometimes you need help to feel that way, because you can't feel it for yourself at that point. So I think he's really reaching out for help in this moment to pull himself back out of that place.
Mm-hmm.
And she's just that first person he thought of.
Because I think she's the first person that genuinely cared about him as a person, that saw him as more than just the scary dude who can get the job done.
Yeah.
And I'm 100% with you, Jen. I think that I agree with you. I think that like, while it's maybe in an ideal world that none of us live in, it's like, yeah, sure, you should have enough confidence to want to live for yourself. But I agree, like, we're human beings, and not only do we live for others, but we live with others. We need their help as well. Like, I have a group of friends, and like, I don't know what I would do without them. I really don't. And also, yeah, and same thing with you. There was a period where I was very, very despondent about life, and I did not want to be on this planet anymore. And I thought to myself the same. I couldn't do anything, not even because of my husband and kids. That was not, but my parents and my grandmother. I was like, I can't do that to them. I could never give them such pain. So, but yeah, and I was reaching out to her, like, this is a connection.
Yeah. Sorry, this is that point where I was telling you earlier that I like cried for like 20 minutes after before I could continue reading.
Yeah, and just seeing, we, at this point, let's face it, we're here because we are emotionally invested in these characters, and seeing these characters that we love so much hurt so desperately is just as painful, because like, you don't want to see your favorite characters get hurt. You want to see them have we know it's a romance. It's a hallmark of romance to have a happily ever after. It doesn't mean they're not going to go through some dark times to get there, but like, seeing them go through these rough patches, like, you don't want them to. You want them to just have their happily ever after, but obviously you need conflict for a story. Unfortunately.
I think it's amazing. Like, one of my biggest problems, I think, in my life was that I always focused too much on the happily ever after, and I never focused on the problem. I don't know if it's because I selectively tuned out media that showed people like romance having problems. I don't know, or if I wasn't presented. But I know that when I met my husband and got married, I was like, oh my gosh, I met my soulmate. Things are gonna be great forever. And I was so naive and so idealistic. And then now, like, after almost 12 years of marriage, I'm like, okay, I'm so happy when I see people in relationships with conflict and heavy issues that they have to deal with, because it comes up for people and it's so realistic, and like, you just can't walk around with blinders on and think that love is just something you fall into and you're going to stay there forever and everything's going to be clouds and roses.
Right. Like, relationships not necessarily require conflict, but like, you don't have to agree on everything. You don't have, like, I love my husband to death. I don't go to him for everything. There's so many things that like we do not have all of the same interests. And sometimes I think it bothers him that like, I don't always want to watch whatever he wants to watch. I'm like, I don't have to love everything that you love. I have my friends that can entertain me with the things that you don't care about. And you've got your friends that can entertain you with the things that you care about. But when the cards are on the table and like shit's hitting the fan, I know you're going to have my back regardless of whether I wanted to watch that show with you.
Yeah. But it's also like, going back to what Mindy said before, like, we're force fed as kids the Disney perspective of love, which is you meet a man, you fall in love instantly, and everything's happily ever after from that point on. And it's not. It's in the real world, we all have problems, we all have personality deficiencies, and it doesn't have to be perfect, but it's still yours.
By the way, my parents actually tried to warn me. My mom was always saying, she's like, marriage is hard and you're not gonna, it's not gonna be love ever after. She probably realized how idealistic I was. And I was like, you just have a bad marriage. But like, what was the best thing when my husband and I first started fighting, when we had like our first big argument? You know what the first thing I thought of was? I was like, oh, Ima and Tati used to argue all the time. And guess what? They're still married, more or less happily, sometimes not happily. I'm like, oh, okay. So my mother was right.
And I can say this here because my parents will never ever watch this, but my parents are people who have been happily miserable together for the last like 30 years. But I mean, I grew up thinking that thankfully thinking that conflict was normal.
Yeah.
Same. Both of my parents, so my parents are both remarried. They're both this is their second marriage. And so as a blended family, we had a lot of differences growing up. Like it was me and my sister and my mom, my stepdad and my stepbrother. But like my parents have now been married for 23 years, I think. Like both my stepdad and my mom were divorced very young and had young kids. They met at a single parents group where they had, everybody got together with all of their kids and could kind of commiserate and stuff like that with being a single parent, but also have that community. And they still hang out with like all of their friends that they met in that single parents group. But like my stepdad is very loud and Italian and came from a very big family and had this very boisterous way of doing everything. And so his solution to a lot of things is I will just be louder than you to get my point across. And my mom grew up an only child. And it was just her and her mom. So like that dynamic in our house was, so there were arguments, things escalated to shouting, but like it was always done with love.
Yep. Yeah, real life.
Exactly.
The older you get, the more you realize your parents were not as bad as you thought they were.
And now that we've lightened the mood.
Yes. So Tora he calls out to Bobby for help, and then you hear that alone forever, and then they just like, because it just fades out. I was like, I just heard that final echo of like forever. And then he hears her call his name, Tora. And I think, Jen, this is where I'm passing over to you.
I think Mindy actually was going to do the second part.
Oh, I was? Okay. I thought I was going to do the third part, but whatever.
Oh. Whatever.
Doesn't matter who does what. But you know what? Maybe I'll do this part because I have stuff to say about it.
Okay.
Okay.
Go for it.
Here's Tora, and then he has this vision, and he sees Poppy standing on the street. Now, okay, hold this in mind because this is literally a picture of Poppy on the street, which he has never seen physically, right? Keep it in mind for a little bit later. And he hears again Tora, and he opens his eyes. He's like, again, ready to see the little teardrops on his eyelids. And again, what he, like you said, what he's like the therapeutic intonations, he says, just take long, deep breaths. Imagine you're at the gym. So I'm trying to remember, is this something that he himself, because I don't remember these lines from anywhere else. So I'm assuming it's something that he has told himself before.
I think with the way that we've got that panel from under the dock at Moonbright, I think this is what she told him when he started to freak out there. Because remember, he was saying, he was like, my heart was beating out of my chest. This is awful. I hate this. What is this feeling? He's never really been there. So I think this is what she was telling him to help calm him down, because that's the only frame of reference she would have. Like, she's like, obviously you work out. Look at you.
Okay.
So I thought this is what she said.
I read it completely differently as more of that therapy brain talk. As like, okay, this is what I use to cope with all of this emotion that I have, because a lot of people who have these types of issues will use things like working out because, as we learned in Legally Blonde, exercise causes endorphins make you happy. Happy people don't murder their husbands. So like, I think the gym is kind of his coping mechanism for like keeping this in check. But that's just the way I interpreted it. and also based on like later panels.
I'm rereading through the panels, by the way. You're right. Yes, Poppy says it. Exactly. Right. So she says the exact same thing. Just take long, deep breaths. Imagine you're training at the gym. Okay. But you're right. I forgot. Okay.
I'll be right back. I have to go to the bathroom so bad. I'm so sorry.
No problem. But yeah, so it's from Poppy, and he remembers other lines that she said. I feel like a stool pigeon, tough love cupcake, right? Which is actually a funnier line that she said. So it's something to help him, like we said, lighten the mood. And he looks better. Like he's still taking deep breaths, but the panel's already lighter. He's more erect. He's standing straighter. His eyes are open. So he's already getting a little bit better. And he thinks to himself again, just take long deep breaths. And he pictures himself doing crunches, sit-ups. Right?
Well, and that posture that he's got after he flashes back to that Moonbright moment, his shoulders have already dropped down out of his ears. Like he's not wearing them for earrings anymore. So like he's clearly he's like I said, it's that riptide. He's coming out of that pull under, and he's coming out the other side because she was able to again be that light for him. But yeah, there's relief in his face in that panel already.
And the text has actually gotten smaller from the last breathing ones too. Here.
So many like physical ways or visual ways to show what he's feeling.
And again, Lily is such a master at micro expressions, and just the physicality of her drawings is nothing short of amazing. Like every time I'm blown away by how such subtle nuances that you would get in, say, like a film or a recorded interaction, she can convey in 2D animation and 2D drawing, which they don't move, but they like, you can see it.
I also just noticed, like the first time when he says, imagine you're at the gym, take a long breaths, it's 3 times repeated. And now it's when he feels better, it's just twice repeated. That's like just showing how he's improving.
Yeah.
Going back to the surface.
Exactly.
So, he pictures himself doing the sit-ups, and, we have a picture of him, crunching, which is, I guess, how he breathes at the gym, because he's in that tank top in that picture. And then we have, just a picture of him. He's not like anymore. He's like, right. It sounds like he's going with the long, deep breaths. So, which is so smart. I thankfully don't like suffer from anxiety or panic attacks really, but I've used breathing a few times and it's great. So it's
and
so
the
good.
background in all, as soon as we got back past that final breathe out from like the thinking about the gym, it literally fades to white. Like the background around him in that next panel, everything's back to full color. I mean, it's nighttime, but like full color. It's not that shadowed encroaching on him anymore.
His light's on again.
Yep. Yeah, it's right. He's back in reality. And you would just like pan out and see him standing over, and then he like stumbles backwards because he's wiped emotionally.
It takes a lot of energy out of you when you're having a panic attack. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I totally will like call out and take a nap if I've been in that space. Oh hell, when we were in the pandemic, like when I finally realized, we were gonna be out of work for 3 months, I had one, and then I did nothing but sit on the couch the rest of the day.
Yep. Emotions are like huge. They have a giant effect. So now we go back to Poppy, and we have a bit of a supernatural moment, and we suddenly her eyes like go wide, which I think we saw in the last episode. And she's like, and Everything went black for a moment, and I felt a sudden surge of dread. She looks around. Even my hands started shaking, and she thinks to herself, Tora. It is like an echo, Tora, Tora. And then, as quickly as it appeared, and no, etc. But I have to say, has anyone here read Jane Eyre?
Not in a long time.
I think I read an abridged version in like 6th grade.
Okay, so Jane Eyre is one of my favorite books, and this is like a major moment that happens in Jane Eyre. Basically, it's the love story of Jane Eyre and Mr. Rochester. And Mr. Rochester at some point is like completely broken down, devastated, depressed, and just like lost hope in life. And because him and Jane have been separated and various other things, and then suddenly he hears in his well, that is true about Mr. Rochester, but Jane is in a fully separate place at the time, and she is about to possibly accept a marriage proposal from a guy she doesn't really want to get married to, but for practical reasons and other things, she might agree. And she's about to say yes, and then suddenly she hears Jane, and that like months later, she's like, okay, I can't marry him. She looks around, she's like, what? She's like, I hear Mr. Rochester, where is he? He's obviously not there because he's like billions of miles away. And she ends up going back to see Mr. Rochester, and he tells her that at that moment he was despairing of life, he didn't want to live anymore, and he just called out her name, Jane, and she heard it. So this is like a direct parallel. This is exactly what happens. She calls Tora, and he hears her.
All the dots are connected.
But I also think Poppy was kind of hearing him, because those ha 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 things were like his heavy breathing.
Okay. I was wondering. Yes, that makes sense.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking.
We also had that moment last episode where she's like, we don't get this in-depth bit that we do now, but where like she's like, I felt like I could hear Tora, and then the moment disappeared and I got mad again. So she can hear him calling back out to her as well. Like she can feel the connection. They just have no idea what it is, or that they're both having it in that moment.
Yeah. They are connected deep inside.
I know there's another webcomic, and I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head, but there's a common trope, and I don't want to generalize and say it's like the Korea K stories or Korean stories, but like that soulmate, like the red thread that's your soulmate, like it's very much that kind of thing of like they are fated to be together. They literally, all that's missing is that red thread connecting them.
Aww. Yeah. So it's gone, and she thinks to herself, so weird, where did that come from? But then it was replaced by the anger I've been stuffing down all day. It comes right back. And she has this angry look on her face, and she thinks to herself, he might not have meant it, but he did it anyway. And I'm so done bending over backwards so everyone feels better but me. I'm never doing this again. She's running across the street. Just like, yes, there are always two sides to the story, right? Tora did things because of whatever his own reasons are, but that doesn't mean that Poppy has to take it.
No.
Mm-hmm. And I know Patty always makes the comment that Poppy is an emotion stuffer, and finally she's learning to stop stuffing them down quite as much. Like she clearly did, because she had to like go back to work and get through the rest of her day. But like, so maybe like, yes, put them in a small box until you can deal with them. But like, yeah, process them when you need to. Process them as soon as you can. Like, don't let it just fester. That's something that I've been working on personally. Like, I don't want to just let something fester, and because then you get petty and then you get vindictive, and that's not a good way to live your life.
Right, you think you're doing favors to the other person by stuffing it down, but yeah, it comes out.
No.
Yeah.
And it usually comes out directed to somebody who isn't actually the person you're mad at.
Yeah.
But I also, in a lot of these first Poppy panels, I also noticed it's really dark in these panels. Like usually her panels are so much lighter, but with the heaviness of her emotions in this episode, we're getting a darker paneled Poppy.
Yeah, I mean, she also was like forced to wait till nighttime because of him. So it's like, it's both actually nighttime and like she's upset.
I know we see those timestamps later on in the text messages, and I was like, she waited. I've waited that long for a date before, she waited so long, and that happened to me once. Never again. Never again.
Oh, nope. I'm one of those people. If we're supposed to be somewhere, I mean, I'm definitely somebody who usually runs like I can tend to run about 5 minutes late or than I want to. But you know, if it's something important, I'm there. And I think she's feeling like she's not important in this too.
Mm-hmm.
And this is somebody who he's always on time for everything. He is a very type A personality when it comes to the things he can control, because he wants to be in control all the time of everything.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that he's like, I'm going to be there at 6 and then he's not, she probably waited a little longer just thinking maybe traffic, but
Yeah,
she waited way longer than she should have, and she is way less upset with him than I would be.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I would ever. I don't know if I've ever waited not long for anyone. I'm usually late. Anyway, it's something I've been working on a lot, so I'm getting better. But anyway, separately. So now we see what, her annoying journey. She has to take a bus to Narin City Square, and then at Narin City Square, she's running and she's, trips and misses the last bus. So she's like, God, that was the last crap. That was the last bus home. People are like, are you okay? She's like, I'm fine. Like, probably skinned her knee, which really hurts. And she, we see her at this intersection. It looks like she's catching a cab. And now we go back to Tora. And Jen, if you want to take over.
Yes. And I'm actually going to point out that in these panels right before Tora, like, you see her on the side of the street, but then you also see this car. It focuses in on this white car that's parked on the side of the road.
Okay, but later on, I at first I was confused, but like later on, I can see why. Like, but yeah, so
because I was like, this is something we need for later in this piece.
I honestly didn't put it together until you just said something.
Either, but now that you mentioned it, I remember being confused by the cars because they didn't look like a cab. I was like, if we're trying to see that she gets into a cab, like I couldn't tell it was a cab, but okay.
Right, I'm like, doesn't look like a cab.
Well, here, the reason I was paying so much attention to this is because I was looking for the cab or something. Like, I was like, how's she gonna get home? Like, and I'm looking at this going, Tora's got a plentiful amount of cars. Maybe he just shows up on the side of the road,
Right, I'm looking for red.
Here I am, like, hoping that this is not going to go as badly as I think it's going to go. But then we come back to Tora, and he's slumped on the bridge, and all you get is this big black undecorated shoe.
Right, it was boring shoe ever. We guys other shoes. I remember we once talked about all of the shoes early on when we still had so many shoes. We talked about every shoe he'd ever worn. Wow, okay, we're a little crazy.
Oh. And you get it pans out to this wide view of him in the next panel where you can see him, the bridge, the car, and everything. And he's in this position with his head back and his knees bent, and it just shows all kinds of visible relief. And he says, it worked. Wise little Bobby. So like, he's still kind of in that like exhausted, heavy after emotion bodily state, but he's managed to pull himself out with it. And then you get the little bubble, I'll pick you up at 6.
You just remembered.
Going back to the coffee shop. Yeah. And then you get a picture of him, and he's got this look on his face like, I fucked up. Sorry, pardon my language, but that's definitely an I effed up moment. And he goes, shit, panicked so hard I wasn't even thinking straight.
Well, and I was just thinking, I just scrolled back and zoomed in. So like in that first panel where we get the wide shot where he's slumped against the thing, and his eyes it's like the eyes are scrunched up, like, I can't believe it worked. He's kind of laughing at himself. And then I'll pick you up at 6, and his eyes shoot open. All of the laughter leaves his face, and he's like, it is that definitely like, oh shit moment where he realizes how badly he screwed up.
Yeah. And then in this next one, this is where I was like, oh, this is getting interesting. There's a thinking bubble of like, I was so sure I'd nail the bastard in time for effing dinner with her. Christ.
Oh my God, he's so overconfident.
And like I just had this moment where I was like, it was like in a situation like this, like if it were like a cartoon, if it were like an animated cartoon, like you would get that like quick little flash of a moment of like he comes home like that 1950s like I Love Lucy kind of thing, and just like drops his sniper rifle by the door. Honey, I'm home.
Oh gosh.
And then in this picture, you see he's holding his phone now, and you see text messages from someone named Elron, saying, "All clear, big bro. Nobody suspicious entered the building. She left the office after waiting by the road for an hour. Waiting for her bus now. We're following in our car. Orders?" ?
God, an hour.
An hour. I was like, you left her for more than an hour?
Right?
I'm like,
I'll be right back. I gotta go put Archie in the bathroom. I think he saw the cat.
Okay. Sorry, it was fun. Okay. So do you guys want to, who do you think Elrod is?
I think it's probably Brian.
Sounds like Brian.
Well, my logic is nobody is in his phone under their correct name. Like I think Quincy is in his phone as Quincess. Poppy is in there as Bobby. Damien is effing Pinky. Like I don't, and I honestly,
Ronzo.
Yeah, Hughes Ronzo. I think it's a way because, and there were discussion about this in another episode. I think when he was texting with Damien, that I think it's honestly as a way as a protection mechanism. If he's ever picked up again by the cops, if his phone is ever searched, if anybody gets his contacts list, they're not going to know who anybody is because nobody's in there under their given name. I mean, they'll probably be able to guess Quincess, but
yeah, Quincess is
but yeah, nobody's. It's a protection mechanism. That way they can't tie anybody back to him directly or the clan.
I mean, I honestly do think it's Brian, but I think we can't count out the fact that it could be somebody else because there's been that one guy that like at the club and at the pool hall that like hangs out with, like is in the shot with Brian and Pinky.
So I think there's another guy, Lewis.
Yeah, Lewis. Okay. Yeah, might be him.
But it just rings a bell.
I can barely remember people's names when I meet them. I am not remembering the guy who had one appearance.
He's not nearly as memorable as Damien was.
No. But I mean, I think it's one of the two of them. Because it's obvious that he has a whole crew. So I mean, it could have been any of the above that he just said to follow her. Because it's really a scouting mission. It's not anything dangerous or like, but I also think he would have given it to somebody who he feels can take a little bit more of responsibility because she means a lot to him. So we'll see. So now we pan back out to this wide shot of Tora looking down at his phone, just standing there. He's finally gotten himself back on his feet. Which I was very happy about. As I'm like, okay, you're gonna be fine now, honey. Like all the head pats for you. And you get more text messages from Elron, and it's 7:42 p.m. So it's already 8 o'clock at night. Like by the time he's getting these, because he got the text at 5:40 and 6:53 in the last one, and now we're getting closer to 8. So he's over 2 hours late at this point. At Narin City Square, massive jam on our way here. Her bus just left. She ran after it and tripped and fell. Seems like it was her last bus home. Orders ? And that's like, I mean, I think that's the white car. Like that's where I made the connection to the white car on that road.
Yeah.
And then at 8:33, I think that's supposed to be in. She's in a cab now, heading towards Highway 35, still in the city square and stuck in another jam. Orders.
She had to wait like 45 minutes for a cab.
Right?
I was so pissed off. Oh my God, like that's so freaking annoying.
Oh.
Or it could be that it just, if they're still stuck in another traffic jam, because it's, she's in a cab now heading toward the highway. Could it be that like that was how long it took her to find an empty cab to get in and then start that travel and have a clear indication of which direction she was heading?
Or if she called the cab, it could have taken it that long to get over there due to the traffic jam.
Yeah.
Unfortunate. And now it's 8:33. Or nope, sorry. Next one is 9/11. Her cab just got on Highway 35 heading towards Patagrass Hill, but the roads are emptying out. We cleared off before she got suspicious. Wait for your orders at the usual place.
Oh my God, 9/11.
Right? I'm like, it took you. Oof. I'm like, that's a really bad traffic jam.
Yeah. That's a big accident traffic jam and rubbernecking. I hate rubberneckers so much.
So I'm from Brooklyn, New York, and I left when I was 19, so I didn't drive myself there until I was much older. But I can tell you, I have sat in the same block in Manhattan for an hour and a half, literally the same block. So it happens.
Oh,
City traffic is infuriating.
I live near Salem, Massachusetts, and I used to have to take people up there for like doctor's appointments as part of one of my jobs that I used to work at. And the idiots, the worst time, like it was like October 28th, they booked this neurology appointment at Salem Hospital.
Oh.
And to get there, I had to go through downtown Salem for Halloween traffic. It was literally like that, except I had to give up because somebody parked the car in front of me in the road.
Oh my God.
Out and left their car in the middle of the road because it hadn't moved in like an hour.
Oh my God.
So that's how I'm seeing this traffic right now.
Yeah.
That's like worst case scenario traffic.
Oh.
And then, but then we pull back out of that now that we're all like, we all hate city traffic. And we actually get a picture of his hand and he's rereading that. Or at least to me, it felt like this was like he had to reread that text message again.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like he made up his mind on what he was doing. And it's 9:14 now. And all he says is done for the day. Good job. The end.
That's, you see, like he added that a minute later. So he has regained enough composure to compliment them, which is fantastic. A, in terms of like, okay, he's composed enough, but also B, that he's nice enough to remember, oh, he has to tell them thank you.
Yeah. And it shows why he's such a good leader for those guys, because when you're in that type of environment where everyone just talks down to you, you can see why they're drawn to him if he's giving them that recognition.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, he doesn't, if I were him, I would be like, sorry guys, I was occupied and sorry I didn't answer because it's like been hours of him not answering him, but whatever, at least he said that.
And it reminded me a little bit of when I think he runs into Gyu when they're dropping Poppy home after bringing her back from Moonbright, and he's like, okay, gotta go to my other job. And he's like, why are you still working so many jobs? Do you need money? And he's like, whoa, what's gotten into you? Why are you being so nice to me?
But I think too, like, Poppy's had a good influence on him,
For sure.
She reminds him to be polite.
Yep.
Say his pleases and thank yous.
Yes. And he's still in that state where he's thinking about her because, he used her to help him pull him out of that darkness and that dark place. And she became that person. And so her voice is still in his head. So I'm sure that's where partially that's coming from too.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And then in this next panel, we see Tora standing there and it's now tap, tap as he's going through his phone. And then you see the lock screen with 21:15, and I am bad at military time. Erin, what time is that?
Oh, that's math. I don't do that. I literally will look at my husband and be like, you need to math that for me because I don't do military time.
Oh, so I think
Yeah,
it's
it's 9.
12 hours back. So
Yeah, it's 9. It's 9:15.
yeah, it's still 9:15. He just sent the other text messages and he closed his phone at, he must have hit the button. But it says Bobby 3 missed calls. And then next panel, just 3. I would have blown up her phone by now, that little hard ass. As we get the whole focus picture back on him.
But at the same time, like, again, this, I mean, timeline wise, this has been what, maybe a month now at this point. Like, he would have, yeah, absolutely blown up her phone and then gone and found her wherever she was. She doesn't know, she still doesn't know how he responds to stuff like that. So yeah, she probably called him like once an hour for the 3 hours she was waiting.
Well, I think
trying to
she
find out where he was.
only called him the first hour. I don't think once she decided she's not waiting for him anymore, I feel like she wouldn't have called him. I don't know. I feel like she was like, oh, goodbye, I'm done.
Yeah, probably.
But also we have to remember, like, this is like later in the day from, like, he only just saw her this morning after like that 4-day gap where neither of them were the brave one to text first.
Exactly.
So I mean, I feel like he should kind of expect this because she's not the type of person who's going to reach out if you don't want to talk to her.
Mm-hmm.
Or if she feels like you don't want to talk to her.
And with the way things he left her at the coffee shop, you know, yeah, she tries a couple times. One, maybe he didn't hear his phone. You try again, and then you wait like 10, 15 minutes. Maybe he was away from his phone. You try again. And at that point, she's like, okay, clearly he's not interested in speaking with me.
But also there's a setting on on Do Not Disturb that if somebody calls you 3 times, it will actually ring. So she's like, that to me is like, well, maybe his phone's on Do Not Disturb. I'll try one last time. You know?
Yep.
Before I get mad. You know? But then we come back. So we get this, we had this very far away image, and now we're coming back in and focusing on his face, and he's looking up like, wait. And you see the question in his face. The what else did I do?
Oh my God. It's like reading this part is like hilarious. You're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. And I said something else to her before I left. What was it? As we're looking at the coffee shop scene.
And we're all like, you said, I'm not asking, I'm telling.
Oh
my God. And he doesn't even remember it.
He doesn't remember it. And I actually had to go back, like, because it's been like a week or two, and I looked it up, and it was literally, hold on, I wrote it down, because he interrupts her. So after he said, I'll pick you up at 6 tonight, Poppy went to tell him that she would be working late, so 6 might be, and after B, he fully interrupted her and said, I'm not asking you, I'm telling you, and then throws money down and says, for the coffee, don't be late.
He doesn't even remember. Oh my gosh.
But that next panel with his face as he's looking at his phone, racking his brain to try to remember what he said, that is the biggest panic face I think we've like the biggest oh shit, I effed up so hard because I know it was bad, but I do not remember it because I had turned off at that point.
It's so hilarious because it's so ironic, right? It was so devastating for her, and he cannot even remember what he said.
No, and it's that don't be late is, I think, part of why she only called him 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
Like that the way he said it to me was very like, this is how it is, this is what it's going to be, and if it's not this, it's not happening. And I mean, that might also be like the snark in my head. But like, there's pure terror on his face here of like, what did I do?
Oh dear, Tora.
Especially where he's already freaking out that she only called him 3 times. So, and then we get these, I think these are like inner thought bubbles. Probably won't make a difference at this point, as if it wasn't enough that I ditched her at the cafe and he's calling Ronzo. Then I had to blow her off again after saying I'd pick her up at 6. Oh, and I'm like, it pulls back out and you see the phone ringing and he's waiting for Ronzo to answer.
8 times.
Yeah. And then we get another panel of this with also, where the F is Ronzo again? And now I'm sitting here going, oh my God, what happened to my baby? Like, I love Gio as a character. I'm like, I don't want anything to happen to him.
My first thought was, oh my God, what happened this time? The last time he was a total red herring, but at the same time, like the guy literally never stops working. So my guess is he's probably just at another job and not able to answer his phone because he's serving somebody at a bar.
Well, I'll tell you what my theory is when we get to the end.
Yes.
Okay.
So I also I was doing that and I was like, is Lily like tricking us again? Or is it like she set us up last time as a trick so we'd be deceived this time?
That's what I think. I think we're totally in for it for real this time.
Right. And then you see him go to call Bobby with a pause.
I'm like, I know, I was so worried that he wasn't going to call her. I was like, don't you dare, you better call her.
Right?
It's like, you don't get to check it out now, man.
Like, just do it. Just rip the Band-Aid off. And then you see him tap to call her. And then it rings like 4 times. And you get
7.
you get the image of him now like walking towards, I'm gonna guess he's headed towards the car because he's kind of coming towards us in the panel. But in the next one, he's at his car and you get just his hips and his hand on the door handle, and you get, come on, Bobby, you can get mad at me later all you want, with some more rings. Just let me know you're safe. And then we come back and we focus in on his face, and you can see the kind of worried expression there.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, it just, the image feels tense to me. I can't put my finger on what it is about his body language, but it feels tense.
That many rings, I think he was thinking she wasn't going to answer him.
And you get the beginning of a ring and then hello. And he goes, Bobby, where are you now? Are you okay? And then you get a bubble from her. I guess I'm in a cab on the highway. Very short, very succinct, like very to the point.
She's not giving him any more than she needs to.
No. And the way his face reads right now to me is very like, oh, I definitely messed up.
Yeah, I think he's picking up her tone.
Oh yeah. And then you get a box from Poppy again. Anyway, I'm almost home now. And you hear him go, Bobby, what? And she interrupts with, see you around. Click.
Yep. As
like,
predicted and as expected.
Done. Not talking to you. I'm mad at you.
I was so proud of her, but at the same time, I'm like, let him apologize.
Yeah, see, I don't think she's ready right now.
Oh, absolutely not. And that's an apology that he needs to make in person. I want to see him grovel a little bit for this because, yeah, this was a big misstep on his part.
Yeah, this one was big in the scheme of things. This one was a much bigger mistake than he's made before.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to make excuses for him at all. Like, I understand where he's coming from, but at the same time, you know, when you're in that place in the beginning, if you're not upfront with, you know, I struggle sometimes, you know, we're going to have these types of issues. it's going to have misunderstandings and people are going to get hurt because most people can't be upfront about it.
On something Poppy said when she was after the coffee shop and she was back at work, and she was like, we just have to communicate. And I was like, yes, that's 90% of problems talk to each other. Like we watch a lot of the like CW superhero shows, and 90% of all of the drama in those shows is because some characters like, I can't possibly tell anybody about what's going on. And it's like, no, oh my God, if you just literally tell anybody what's going on, all of these problems wouldn't be happening. You'd have a team to help you.
Right.
And obviously he's not in a place that he can't quite tell her everything yet because he still hasn't read her in on the whole mafia spiel, but like, we'll get there. I know we will.
But also when you have trauma like that, sometimes you don't realize you're having a trauma response. You know, so he might not even be aware of what he's doing to her with this type of thing at the moment. And he still has to atone for it because he still treated her like dirt in the middle of it. But I think it's something that they're going to have a very serious conversation about.
Oh yeah.
And I really hope we get to see it.
I want her to bite him again.
It's funny.
And we pull back and we get a full view of like, he's small and next to his car, and you're looking out over the bridge. And when you zoom in, you can tell he's still like staring flabbergasted at his phone.
Yep.
Like, at least you hung up on me.
Right. And then in the next panel, we get almost the same image, but in big bold letters, there's bzz, bzz above. And I'm like, the last time we saw these letters was at Poppy's grandma's house. And where it pans all the way in to just this view of his torso and him holding the phone and it buzzing again. And then we get that really, really awful. So I'm going to use the word really awful. I was going to use the word really awful image, but like it makes me feel awful because I know something bad's going to happen. Just like the last time, a warning, highly unusual movement detected at balcony area. And then in the next panel, you see the back of him as opposed to the front. And you gotta be kidding me.
Yep. Okay, so can I theorize about what's gonna happen?
Yes.
I totally think that this is legit this time. I don't know if it's Gil or someone else. I think that I'm hoping at least we're gonna be in person real like action next time. The porch, do you incapacitated? Because I don't think she would throw us off twice. I think that would be too anticlimactic.
Yeah. I also like part of me is scared that something bad has happened to Gyu. But I'm also a little like Poppy is still in the cab right now, which means no one's at the house.
Yeah, like, so who would it be?
Is she going to walk in on this happening?
Is Tora going to get to her before she does? Get there before she does? I mean, how far is he?
Like, is Tora going to call all hands on deck and be like, everybody to this location? Like, who's closest?
Yeah, like, where is this? We'll be at the regular place waiting for your orders. Like, how close is that to her place if they were also stuck in traffic? I know, so it's obviously a motion sensor, but I'm like, I know there were also, didn't he install cameras too? Whether it was not necessarily facing or were they just the motion sensors in the trees?
I think it was just the motion sensors in the trees. That's at least all we have confirmation of was the motion sensor. And I don't think he would put a camera there because that's a little bit more of a breach of trust than a motion sensor.
So even if it wasn't necessarily looking at her apartment, but like the parking lot or something like that, like I can't imagine that her complex doesn't have like a CCTV.
Yeah, but that's something he would have had you hack into.
Right. Yeah.
As opposed to like worrying about it. And he probably
Wouldn't
had
even
no
need to
reason to hack in
He's
it.
the security guard now.
Right? But they wouldn't have had any reason to hack into it until now. But I do think that it's Gil and that he's going to try and set Poppy up to take the fall for whatever shady crap he's done.
I don't know. I'm
Because,
hoping
like,
for
what-
action and drama
If
next time.
he can't pin his wife's right, I'm like, he can't try to pin his wife's murder on Poppy. Like, what cause would she have to murder his wife?
He's secretly in love with Gil and his chin hairs. He's so desirable.
I still the last time I was holding out hope that it was somehow Goliath, and I want to know more about him, and I know we haven't gotten like anything besides him jumping off a cliff at the end of season 1, and I want to know more about this this little weasel.
Yeah. And there's so many possibilities here, because we had that conversation where Gil was talking to his wife and like why didn't I leave you so that way you would take the fall and not me, and he got that spark of an idea from her. When we first started to learn how shady he was. But then we've also we don't know what for sure what Poppy's connections to any sort of mafia is. So it could also be someone on her end.
She did recently go home. Who knows? Not necessarily what might have followed her back. I can't imagine that jewelry is trying to sneak into her apartment, but like
probably not after Tora basically bitch slapped him.
But like, could it be someone back from Moonbright after seeing her with Damien and Tora in Moonbright? Something that followed her home in the bad way.
Yeah, I mean, I can only think of either Gil or her mafia connections, which Moonbright maybe if there's something to do with her mafia stuff.
I mean, the only answer we have where this has any sort of good outcome that I can think of is like, oh, maybe like one of her aunts showed up to like stay over for a couple of nights and is out on the balcony, and no one else knows that they're home.
Wouldn't that be a relief?
Then they can have a heart to heart and she could tell him all about Tora. Yeah.
Oh, he's gonna rush in there like some sort of white knight, and if he met was it Danny and Mirabelle or something like that? Imagine them seeing him for the first time and being like,
he just like busts open the door and then
how did you get that?
No, they'd be like, girl, that is an upgrade. Props to you.
Right?
Anywho, well, we'll see what happens next time. I'm already, I know, it's like, is it Friday yet? Right?
Wow.
Right.
No, I need more. All of these cliffhangers are like keeping me on edge all week.
I know. Oh.
Yep. Well, we'll see. Thank you so much for coming on. It was so nice. I really appreciate you coming on. Thank you.
Thank you for
Awesome.
having us.
Thanks for having us again.
Thanks, our pleasure. Have a good night.
Have a good night.
Bye.
Thank you so much to my current patrons: Susie, Lady Libris, Lily, Jenny, Haley, Maria, Molly, Veronica, Emily, Joe, Rochelle, Saucy Tacos, Meg, Ann Rose, Priya, Alexa, Misty, Laura, Joanne, Patty, Jen, Imelda, Esther, I'm Watching You, Taurus, Poppy Seed, Marie, Jen, Emily, Jean, Jen, Erin, T, and Kay. Your support is truly appreciated.